Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we will be concluding our discussion on the Spider-Man 2099 tie-ins as well as looking at the final tie-in comic for Spider-Verse overall, as we take a look at Spider-Man 2099 Volume 2, Number 8. Now, last time on Spider-Man 2099, with Deimos the Inheritors captured in a stasis field, the Spider-Man 2099 and Lady Spider were able to perform an autopsy on his former body. Unfortunately, while they were able to get some results of the body, one of those results actually being important for today's issue, they didn't get anything concrete, and thus it was pretty much the whole thing was considered kind of a fluke. To make matters worse, Deimos managed to find a way around the stasis field, as thanks to his physiology, he was able to push back against it as hard as he could until eventually the excess power from the field wound up killing him, and his consciousness wound up getting transferred to another clone body. With that body now on its way to 2099 to take care of Miguel and May. Thankfully, the pair wound up getting a bit of assistance from one of the heroes of 2099, specifically the Punisher, who was able to hold Deimos back long enough for Miguel and May to jump from 2099 back to Earth 13, with the assistance of a dimensional teleporter that Miguel got off of his Exiles counterpart when his body got thrown into Earth 616 back in issue 5. Unfortunately for the pair, when they return to Earth 13, they find that the safe zone isn't exactly safe anymore, as upon arriving, they find that the Spider Army is gone, and all that's left in this world's Central Park are the bodies of several dead Spider people, which is where this issue picks up, as, put simply, Miguel and May don't really know how to comprehend everything. They just see all the bodies, they don't see any other Spideys, and they begin to wonder if they're all that's left, if the Spider Army is kaput, and all that's really left for them is for the Inheritors to just wait for the Inheritors to hunt them down and finish them off. Which the thought of this does kind of get to them a bit, especially May, who actually takes a moment to just step aside and hurl before she kind of clings to Miguel and is clearly afraid. However, Miguel does assure her that everything will be fine, and while she asks if they're going to die, he says yes, but not today. Not today. It's nice, and I do at least like that we get to see more of Miguel acting more noble and trying to keep May's spirits up. However, as they're hugging, that's when Miguel notices something amidst all the wreckage and destruction, and so he and May go to check out what it is, and sure enough, in the middle of Central Park, they find the remains of Leopardin. While mostly kind of in disuse and disrepair, but still mostly in one piece. And as such, they look at this and think, if they can get this thing back up and running, maybe it could help them out. Unfortunately, there's kind of a problem with that. They don't know where to fix it. After all, they can't go back to 2099 with Deimos running around, and odds are Miguel can't think of any other facilities in any other part of the multiverse that'd be able to help them, especially since most other worlds are not set in 2099, so they probably don't have access to that technology. But May thinks that she does know a laboratory that could help them, and from what she hears, it's considerably huge. At which point, we then cut over to May's universe, as May ends up going back there with the dimensional teleporter and assumes her guise as May Riley, because the lab that she wants to utilize, it belongs to Oscorp, and it's apparently such a huge lab that it's almost as big as a football field, with Oscorp calling it the stadium. And so May decides that she wants to utilize her status as a lady of society to ask permission to use it. Specifically, she goes to this world's Harry Osborn, or Harold as he's called, and she begins telling him about how she's friends with Lady Spider. Like, that's the reason why she was at her ball, and the Lady Spider has need of a lab and could very much use that. And Harry does agree to allow May to use the lab, on the condition that she join him for dinner, which May happily accepts. As such, boom! Miguel and May now have access to the lab. Everything should be smooth sailing from here, right? Well, not really. May did swear Harry to secrecy about the use of the lab, he did need to ask his father for permission. And when Harry talked to his dad, Norman was all happy and willing to give it the lab. After all, the concerns of Lady Spider are of great importance to him, and if she needs the lab, then odds are it must be for something important, and of course he wants to help such a fine and noble, upstanding citizen of their society. Yeah, he's full of it. If you know anything about Spider-Man at all, then you know that Norman Osborn is the Green Goblin, and he wants to take this opportunity to plan an ambush ambush, as once Miguel and May are set up in the lab, he contacts the other 6 men of Sinistry and lets them know that Lady Spider is going to be in said lab and that they should probably take advantage of the situation. As such, as Miguel and May end up moving the pieces of Leopard into the lab, they begin trying to think of the ways to make Leopard work for them. After all, they can get the robot up and running, but it was still taken down so they need to still find ways to work with it. On top of that, they don't exactly have access to a lot of materials available, as this world is still set in the 1890s, and, well, not a lot of, despite May's innovation with her suit, there's not a lot of technological innovation running around. But of importance for Miguel, he wants something that's radioactive. After all, from the autopsy from Deimos' body, they were able to discover that the inheritors are weak to radiation. So if they can get a radioactive power source for Leopard, it could tip the scales in their favor should they end up going up against the inheritors. Unfortunately, though, like I said, this is the 1890s, so radioactive materials are not exactly easy to come across, and any mention of them in the scientific community are rumors at best. So they don't really have a lot of strong foundation to work on. However, as things are going on, the pair of Spideys do end up getting a couple interruptions. First, from Harold, as he comes in and wants to see what the heck's going on, and of course when he sees the remains of the giant robot, he is in awe. While May tells him to kindly leave, well, he is still a little awestruck to see these 2 spider people here. However, and the other interruption comes in the form of Peter. Peter Parker is calling in to check on Miguel and see how he's doing, and Miguel, for his part, is just happy that Peter is okay, that the army is still in one piece, and so he asks where he is, and Peter, of course, confirms that he and the army are on Earth 3145, and Miguel says that he will join up with them later, but he's in the middle of something, and so he just wants Peter to send his coordinates. I'm guessing, and so as everything's as all that's going on, sadly, the conversations between Miguel and Peter and May and Harold once more get interrupted, as immediately one of the walls to the lab gets blown in, and from the debris and rubble come the 6 men of Sinistry, or five out of the 6, as they all come in and get ready to start wrecking the place, which of course prompts another fight. Miguel of course realizes the Green Goblin is the one calling the shot, so he targets him first, and while the Green Goblin treats Miguel like he's any other Spidey, Miguel does end up using his finger claws and slashes at his chest. He intentionally misses Norman's neck, as he's not trying to kill him, but he does make him think that's what he is trying to do, as he says he slashes his neck, and that he'll bleed out. Of course, he won't actually die. Of course, this is all a bluff. He's not actually going to die, but he will bleed a lot, and then he thinks the bluff will be enough to get the Green Goblin packing, which it apparently does, as he ditches the fight. And he's not the only one, as Miguel immediately yells that if anyone fights him, they will die, and as a result, Mysterio says, "Screw this shit, I'm out," and goes away, thus leaving only the Vulture, Electro, and Dr. Octopus to deal with them. Unfortunately, in the midst of the battle, Doc Ock ends up knocking out Harold, and when Miguel goes in to fight the Vulture, Electro takes advantage of this opportunity to blast the Miguel and ends up sending him flying out of a window, where he ends up flying right into the cruiser of Kraven the Hunter, who immediately thinks that, oh, well, I can just take care of you right now, so you can just stay right there. Hey, right there, well, I think I have a perfect weapon to deal with you. And then Miguel punches in the glass on his chopper. After that, he ends up webbing him up and takes control of the thing, but meanwhile, back in the facility, well, May's kind of getting pinned down by the 3 supervillains, as she ends up taking cover behind Leopard's head, and the 3 villains decide that they're going to finish her off right then and there, with Electro calling dibs, so to speak, and blasting at her with electricity. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, she was hiding behind Leopard's head, and the instant Electro hits said head, the extra voltage manages to wake the thing up. And upon waking up and seeing the supervillains, it immediately jumps into action, as while they had to disassemble Leopard to bring it to this lab, it still has full control over all those pieces, and immediately just gets its limbs go rocketing into place and starts knocking and kicking the 6 aside, knocking them into walls, just decking them just full body decking them. And when Doc Ock thinks, fine, then I'll do this myself, Miguel flies in on Kraven's ship and just shoots at him. I assume that when he hit him, it was like rubber bullets or maybe tranq darts. I don't know. I think it's rubber bullets because we don't see any open wounds and I don't see any darts there. But either way, it ends up knocking Otto out. As such, Miguel ends up flying in, and they end up going to check on the unconscious bodies of the 6. And Miguel makes a discovery, as when he opens up the hatch for Doc Ock's tentacles, it turns out that the power source for it was a radioactive one. It wasn't properly aligned, and even Miguel admits that that if Otto had continued using it, he would have been dead of cancer within a year. But with with this little discovery, plus the salvage tech that they were able to get off the rest of the Six Menace Industry, they're able to actually repair Leopardin and get it back up and running. And I'm assuming while they're making these repairs is when Peter calls Miguel and May and tells them all hands on deck, we're going to Loom World. However, as they finish up repairs, the lady May ends up realizing that Harold has gone missing, and while Miguel just thinks that he probably strayed when his life was in danger, well, May says that he's just trying the best he can, and we cut back to Harold as he's back in his home, as he's back in his estate, and wants to go talk to his father as Norman's in his private chambers. Of course, Harold's trying to tell him, "Look, we were just robbed, we were invaded. You gotta talk to you about this." And again, Norman tells him to piss off, but Harry ain't taking no for an answer and bursts right in. And the sight he finds is his father sitting in a chair, still wearing his goblin gear with his mask hanging off the chair. And a gun in his hand. And so when Norman sees his son standing there, he thinks, well, I guess we have a problem then, don't we? Before he opens fire. We don't end up seeing the aftermath of this, but it's very much assumed that Harry was killed by the shot, as the final shot of the comic cuts back to May and Miguel as they're riding on Leopardin's shoulders as it flies off to go join the final battle on Loom World. So there you go. Okay, so first, thoughts on the issue. I think this is a fun finale. Again, while we don't, I think what makes it cool too is that, for one thing, I like that we get to see more of May's world. While the story the story takes place in the Spider-Man 2099 comics, I do like that we get to see more of this world, because we only got a little snippet of it thanks to the story that we saw in Spider-Verse #1. But now we get to explore it more, and what I like about it, we actually get some follow-up to what happened in that story, and events in the comic are direct consequences from that story, since May has to ask for the Osborns' permission to utilize their lab. Of course, Norman becomes aware that Lady Spider is essentially in a prime position to be attacked, and so he alerts the Six Menace Industry, hey, that lady that got in our way, she's in a place where we can go after her. Let's take advantage of that. So I do kind of like how that goes, and again, it is kind of cool. And of course, it's just fun seeing these two Spideys teaming up to duke it out with these supervillains. That's another thing I like about Spider-Verse. While the Inheritors are still considered the big boss, so to speak, it's fun seeing the Spideys just teaming up for little things like this, fighting against supervillains and duking it out, having to deal with another Spidey's own brand of weirdness. One of my favorite things is when Miguel he just acts cocky in battle, which, yeah, that's the difference between him and Peter, as Miguel is a lot more confident than Peter is when it comes to all this stuff, and he doesn't quip as much as him. In this case, especially when he's duking it out with a Six, as he ends up on Kraven's glider, or flying machine, Kraven at course is arrogant, thinking, oh, well, in that case, I'll just take care of you right here, before Miguel just punches in the glass covering for his machine. He's like, I'm sorry, were you saying something? Like, I just like that little bit of arrogance there. But again, of course, it's still cool to see May's world's versions of the Sinister Six, and again, I do like how it works with the steampunk aesthetic for all of them. They still utilize the same gimmicks that you would expect from the Sinister Six, but again, they're downgraded to fit the world, as the Green Goblin's glider is less high tech than it is. The Dr. Octopus actually has to utilize a control panel to utilize his octopus arms instead of a neural interface. Electro Suit still has those big volts. We got Vulture actually having to use flight capabilities and glider stuff with his wings. Again, it's just kind of cool. I like it. It's just kind of cool, and I like it. And of course, I do kind of like another thing that I do like is the beginning of the issue, when Miguel and May are on Earth 13, and just seeing the aftermath of the battle with Solus, because, well, here's the thing, we don't really get a lot of the hopelessness in Spider-Verse. And I know it sounds weird for me to say, because I like stories where things go well. I like seeing the good guys win. I love having the message of good can triumph if you just keep trying. But this is the thing, but you have to remember this one thing. The war with the Inheritors are not going to stop. At this point in time, the Inheritors were not planning to stop until they had gotten every single Spider person. For them, this wasn't a war, this was extermination. And so, for a lot of these Spideys, they had to band together because they believed that this was their only hope of survival. And so, coming back to the place that was supposed to be their safe haven and finding it not only without the spider army, but with several dead spider people lying around, it can be disheartening, especially since you haven't gotten any word from the spider army. You don't know where they are in the multiverse, what they're doing, and so on and so forth, especially in the case of Miguel and May, as canonically, the last time they talked with the spider army was when Peter was checking in on them to see how they were doing, and Miguel was going to try and share information on Deimos' body before Genix just cut them off, which, again, I think would make them even more emotional, because they don't have no idea what could happen to the spider army at that point. Could something have gone wrong? Were they hurt? Are they in any danger? They don't know. And for all they know, the communications are down too. So it makes sense why they would probably feel disheartened. While Miguel tries to keep it together more than May does, as he's the one that comforts her and says, "Look, I'm sorry," and tells her, "No, we can keep fighting. Yeah, we may die, but we're not going to die today. And we're not going to die today. We're not going to stop fighting." But at the same time, since this is his comic, you see his inner monologue, and his inner monologue is that he's scared. He's scared that they may just be the last Spideys left. That they all may be dead, and they may just have to face facts. They may just end up dying. But he's also trying to keep it together because they're still alive. They can keep fighting. And so I do like that he also offers comfort to May, who's feeling very similar, and, well, her reactions are more visceral as she ends up vomiting and actually does express her fear. Because, again, technically speaking, she's just a normal person. And while she's not a direct target for the Inheritor, since she's not technically a spider totem, she did side with the spiders, and it's clear the Inheritors don't take kindly to anyone that does that. Especially when it was showcased with Deimos, as despite the fact that he learned that May was not a spider totem, he was still more than willing to kill her because she defied him. So imagine that, being put in this position and ultimately realizing you may be alone now, that you may not have anyone to turn to. It can be scary. And I like how they portray that in that moment. Just having these two Spideys just realize this. Hold on one sec. Sorry, dog stuff. But, yeah, like I said, I do like how they portray it in the comic. Which, I think is very realistic. This is a war, and they are fighting for survival. So, again, I like that. Just having that moment. Again, what still makes it good for me is that they still don't give up. They don't just give up hope here. But it's realistic to have just like moments of doubt, have moments of fear and realizing we may not walk away from this. But at the same time, they're still willing to keep fighting. So I like that. We do occasionally get moments like that in the story when the characters have moments to breathe. But in this case, I do like that we kind of see the weight of it with Miguel and May here. So I dig it. But again, what I still like about it is still the action. I do like that we kind of take advantage of the fact that since we have all these different Spidey continuities crossing over, we get to take advantage of that. Again, we saw the stuff with Miguel and May fighting side by side to take on her version of the Sinister Six, but another added benefit, again, they're working on repairing the Leopardin, the giant robot from the Japanese Spider-Man live-action series. That's awesome! It's fucking awesome! And what I love is that it ends up helping them during the story. When Electro gives Leopardin a jolt, it wakes it up just enough for it to realize, oh hey, there are supervillains there. Let's take care of that. And just starts smacking them aside with its giant limbs. It's awesome. It's freaking awesome. And it's just really cool to see them all interacting. These different Spideys and gimmicks from all these different continuities that under normal circumstances you would never see in the same place, but here they are just kicking ass. You got a Spider-Man from the future, a lady spider from the past, and they're working alongside a giant robot from a Japanese tokusatsu series. You can't deny that's awesome. It's silly, stupid, but just so freaking awesome, and I love it. And ultimately, I think that's the major strength with the story, and honestly, with Spider-Man 2099, with the Spider-Man 2099 tie-ins as a whole. The main gimmick with these 3 issues has mostly just been, well, I think it's really been just kind of working things out at their own pace. In the case of Miguel, since he's separated from the Spider Army, he does his best to try and carry his own weight with the people he's with, especially in the case of May, as they're able to coordinate well with each other, as since they're both kind of from tech-based worlds, though Miguel even admits he's more of a biologist than a technician. It's still pretty cool to see him interacting with them and still trying to think of ways outside the box to take care of the inheritors. It's like in the case where he suggested possibly contacting the other heroes of 2099 to give the Spider Army some assistance, which, again, kind of a fair deal, but actually, I don't understand why they do that. Though maybe it's because this is only their fight and they don't want to get anyone else caught in the crossfire, especially since it has been showcased the inheritors are able to very easily kill anyone that gets in their way. But at the very least, I do kind of like the forward thinking, and throughout the whole comic, we do see kind of Miguel thinking outside of the box to fight off the inheritors. When he tricks Deimos into going into the stasis field, when he calls the Punisher to act as a distraction so he and May can make a getaway. So even here, when he and May find the remains of Leopardin and they decide that they're going to repair it and build it back up so they can use it to their advantage against the inheritors. I like that. I like that forward thinking, and I think another thing that makes it work is, again, the dialogue. Miguel O'Hara as a character has been described as pretty much zagging where Peter zigs, and you can kind of see that in their demeanors. As I mentioned when I talked about the plot summary, as I mentioned when I talked about how the stuff with Miguel when he was fighting the Six Men of Sinistry, Miguel is a lot more arrogant than Peter, and that was a consistent part of his character even before he got his spider powers. And so to kind of see that with him as Spider-Man 2099, how he typically likes to take advantage and screw with his opponents isn't by constantly making quips and getting under their skin. It's by pointing out their follies. When things go wrong for them, he's quick to come in and kind of pour salt on the wound, so to speak. When Deimos gets trapped in the stasis field, he immediately is mocking him and says, "Yeah, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be here for a while." And when Deimos tries bargaining with him, Miguel just brushes him off, saying, "Yeah, no, I'm not going to listen to a thing you say. You're the one in the stasis field. I'm out here, so you don't really have anything to stand on." And then likewise, when he's battling the Six Men of Sinistry in May's world, he's still very much confident. He's annoyed that he has to deal with these guys, but every time he gets an advantage and the villains are stunned, he's like, "I'm sorry, what's going on?" It's again, that's how he does his humor. He just pours salt in the wound when they realize that they're kind of screwed, and I think it works. It's a nice little bit of mind games and showcases just how confident Miguel is in his abilities. He's still very much more serious-minded, but it's still clear. But I do like how it operates with him, and I like how he contrasts with Lady Spider. Sadly, he doesn't really get a lot of time with Six-Armed Spider-Man, as he dies very quickly into his tie-ins, which again kind of sucks. Because after Spider-Verse, I did read his one-shot. It's fine, it's nice. But overall, well, not really a one-shot, it was an issue of what if. But anyway, whatever. Whatever. At the very least, I do like the interactions between him and May. Because again, because Miguel is from a future that's so technologically advanced, and May herself is already kind of a techie, especially with how she built her suit, of course she'd be interested in learning more about it, and she and Miguel do kind of click in some ways. Not just with them being both their world's respective spider people, but also in them just kind of exchanging ideas and working with each other. When Miguel asks her help to understand the dimensional teleporter, she's more than happy to figure it out. When they're doing when he's showing her the marvels, she's in awe, but of course she's in awe, but for him, this is just like Tuesday. I like seeing how that I like kind of seeing how that goes and how they play off each other. And again, in the beginning of this issue, when they go back to the safe zone and they wonder if they're the last Spideys left, she turns to him for comfort, and he ultimately says, "It's okay, we may die, but we're not going to be dying today. We'll keep fighting." I like that, though he does kind of lose points, or after he sees Leopardin, he does tell her to stop asking questions for a minute. So, yeah, it's still pretty douchey of him. Miguel can be kind of a douche, and can be kind of a douche sometimes. But, again, I do like how that bit of character interaction. And on top of that, I freaking love the action. It's just fun, very fast-paced, very dynamic, and takes advantage of the characters and their abilities well. I like how I like how they maneuver, I like how they coordinate with one another, how they fight the villains, and some fights I think are just great. It's still, this tie-in still has plenty of kick-ass moments that you can sit back and enjoy. I loved when Punisher 2099 came in, as while I'm not a big fan of the Punisher, at the very least I thought it was still cool to see another superhero from 2099 show up in the book, and again, curb stomp Deimos, which, yeah, you can still make the argument, well, maybe this is unrealistic. Deimos is taking on spiders. Why is this guy giving him trouble? But on the other hand, it's very much cathartic to see Deimos keep getting smacked in the head with a titanium baseball bat. It's funny, okay? So I'm still going to give kudos to that, and it has plenty of other moments with that with that writing in mind, bringing in humor tied to the characters and their relationships, like when when in the beginning of the comic where Tyler Stone is patting himself on the back for having gotten rid of Spider-Man, only to see Spider-Man swinging around and he realizes, oh shit, he's back. And then on top of that, when Spidey does go to see him in his office, and Tyler at first is trying to stay all calm and collected, when Miguel makes his demands, he's like, "Oh, why should I listen to you?" He's like, "Well, you're gonna have to leave your office sometime, and you might do something that I might not like." At which point Tyler's like, "Hey, he wants to do what he says." I like that. It's fun. I like the timing of it, and I love that's how the humor kind of works here. Just having having these characters who think they have the ball in their court, that everything's going their way, only for them to get sideswiped, and then for them to realize, oh, I'm screwed, aren't I? I like that type of humor. It's very fun, and it's kind of nice playing with that expectation and then just kind of dashing it. It's great comedic timing, in my opinion, and it works well and it works well. So on the whole, it works well. And again, we still get we do get some nice stuff with the side characters. I like seeing them coordinate. I like the creativity and how they try and find ways to take down the Inheritors. Again, overall, the Spider-Man 2099 tie-ins, I think, are a lot of fun. Are they perfect? Some minor flaws here and there. Minor flaws here and there. The humor can sometimes be a little distracting, not too much, but a little, especially considering the situation. And while the autopsy of Damos's body did give Miguel and May the whole radiation is something they're weak to thing, I feel like that whole, autopsy thing was kind of pointless, especially since the radiation thing was something that was revealed in other tie-ins. Now, you could make the argument, well, this is how they came across the information, but quite frankly, I feel like that was still kind of a reach if you're trying to actually find something, because ultimately they could have gotten the information any other way. That maybe Spidey talked to them and said, "Hey, look, we're on a world they can't go to because it's radioactive." And so Miguel's like, radiation, maybe we could use that. So I feel like that could have been a better way to do it. So the whole thing with Damos's body, despite being the reason why Deimos pursues them, I feel like it ultimately turns out to be pointless, as they build up so much about how studying the Inheritors' physiology is so important, it may give them an advantage, and yet the only bit of information we can get out of it is that they're weak to radiation, something that was established in other comics. So, yeah, nothing really useful there. So I am going to call that a flaw. Otherwise, though, still a fun comic, a fun tie-in with great action, great character interactions, great humor, some honestly pretty good artwork, which let me see if I can show an example of it. Let me see if I can find issue 6 of 2099, because one of my favorite shots is when we see the three Spideys just swinging around. Here it is. This shot right here, I think, is just great. Seeing the various Spideys swinging around Nueva York, it's fun. I like it. So I like that. It's got great artwork, and got great artwork and portrays the story well. On the whole, like I said, on the whole, the Spider-Man 2099 tie-ins are a lot of fun, and honestly, on the whole, I think and since this is the final tie-in, I might as well just say this. I think, since we're reaching the end of Spider-Verse, and specifically this book, I think Spider-Verse is still a lot of fun. As I've hopefully showcased throughout the story, while there are some things about the story that I feel could be improved in some areas, the story itself as a whole is still just a lot of fun. It's still really damn cool to see all these different spider people all interacting with one another. Even if they're it's clear that they tried to put as much fan service in these books as they could, as they try to get as many Spideys in on the fray as possible, as they got, whether they be in the foreground or in the background, whether they have a major role or just a cameo. I like that we get to see that they try to get as many Spideys as they can, and because, quite frankly, while it is still annoying to see some Spideys that you may be a fan of get killed off, at the very least, it's still fun to see them in action, working alongside these other spider people and kicking ass. And it makes it even better if they do come to the forefront and become major characters, because this allows you to continue their stories, see where they go from when you last saw them, how everything transpired after their happily ever afters or after we stopped looking in. And on top of that, because we get to see them interacting with all these other different spider people, it allows some great character stuff as they get to compare and contrast their lives with their counterparts. Again, one of my favorite moments in the book is when Pavitr in the main story was realizing the similarities between him and Peter Parker's lives and began wondering if he was really just an echo, which led to some really great character interactions between him and Billy Braddock. I thought that was really nice. In Spider-Verse Team Up, I thought it was amazing and great to see these different varieties of Spider people all interacting with one another, some getting along, some clashing. But one of my favorite team ups was when we had Spider-Man Noir and Six-Arm Spider-Man working alongside each other when they went to go find their monstrous counterpart to recruit into their army. As we got to see these two different Spider people from two different eras interacting, and you got to see Spider-Man Noir just kind of marveling at the future, so to speak, how advanced things were compared to his world, and even seeing the alternate versions of people he loved and realizing how different they were from the ones he knew. I love that shit. And we got some great, and of course we got some nice little things as we get to see people exploring these new worlds in the tie-ins. Like when we got to see Genix's world, I thought that was amazing. While in Spider-Woman's case, I did like that we actually got to see more of Loom World beyond the stuff with the Inheritors, especially loved it when Jessica, Cindy, and Spider-Man Noir were exploring the Sand Desert. I thought that was really cool and creative, and just kind of a mishmash of strange post-apocalyptic ideas that I think worked out in the end. It was just kind of interesting to look at. I loved the stuff with I loved seeing more with Genix's world and the Scarlet Spider's tie-ins. As we get to kind of see how this world is built up from his vision and how the people in it adapt and interact with and operate with it. So especially when we saw that world's version of certain superheroes like Iron Man and Johnny Storm. And it's still really damn cool just to see all these different, it brings together some great character moments for a lot of other Spideys. When we see the Amazing Spider-Man seeing Spider-Gwen and him almost sending her away. Admittedly, that. Or better yet, when Gwen met the Goblin Peter, the one who pretty much went off the deep end after she died in his world. I thought it led to some really good character stuff and some great emotional catharsis as we see the worst case scenario for that situation, meeting up with a character who, for in her world, the opposite thing happened and they both have regrets about it. I feel like that led to some really great emotional catharsis overall. Speaking of emotional catharsis, I loved when we got the twist with Spider-Ben in the main storyline, as I think it was really cool to see a world where Uncle Ben got bitten by the spider instead of Peter Parker, and ironically, that in his world, things just got so bad that he gave up, and because he wasn't around, the world went to hell. And as a result, we not only get to see Peter reunite with someone that he lost, but also inspire him back up, make him realize that his fight wasn't worthless, that he could still have merit. And again, what makes it better too is that we get to, and again, another thing I like is when we have the Amazing and Superior Spider-Man duking it out, because from Peter's perspective, this is the guy who stole his body, and this is the guy who stole his body when he stole his body. This is the time displaced Superior Spider-Man. So he's from the past when Otto was in Peter's body. It leads to some nice emotional catharsis and leads to some honestly cool mirror matchups as we see the two Spideys duking it out, while also getting up some nice traditional Spider-Ock action as Doc Ock still looks down on Peter, but Peter just treats it as if there's a regular supervillain outing. I love that. It's still really damn good, and the story is just chock full of fan service and just so much effort to try and gather as many Spider people from as many mediums as possible into one place, whether it be in the main storyline or in the tie-ins, and it's a lot of fun as a result. As again, it's not a perfect story. It still irks me in some regards that some with how some of the Spideys did have to be thrown to the sacrificial flames just to keep the story going, especially since some of those Spideys were from pre-established stories and had their own things going on, only for them to just go, they're gone now. So I do feel like that is kind of sucky, and in some cases it was in poor taste. Again, go back to the Spider-Man and his amazing friends thing. That's just no. And on top of that, again, like I said, the Inheritors sometimes could feel like they were a bit overpowered in comparison to the Spiders, so that could be annoying as well. And on top of that, the finale for the main storyline still felt rushed. And if I have to list another flaw, especially after looking at all the tie-ins, while I do enjoy the main story, when compared to all the tie-ins, it feels slightly bare bones in some regard. It's still serviceable and has some great pacing and action, but it's mostly just some fan service. It mostly feels like fan service and seeing Peter interacting with all these different spider people. Whereas the tie-ins kind of expand on that more and showcase more of how all the other different Spideys were working off of each other and just doing their own thing. As in the tie-ins, we saw these Spideys not just fighting off the Inheritors, but having to kind of cope with this situation. Like, going with the 2099 tie-ins, we saw Miguel and May have to work with each other and adapt to the situations as they came along. As we saw May marveling at 2099, seeing them have to deal seeing the pair have to deal with May's villains when they had to go to her world to repair Leopardon. Or in the Spider-Woman tie-ins, as we see Jessica have to deal with essentially babysitting Cindy, who's a less experienced Spidey compared to her, and then likewise when she has to go to Loom World as a spy and meets her bitch of a counterpart there and have to kind of deal with confronting her. I love that. And again, there's even great and of course we have the Spider-Verse team-ups, which, like I said, pair these all these different Spideys together. We got Scarlet Spiders, as we see these 3 different clones of Peter as they all interact, and all of them have very different demeanors. As a result, and again, and even the Spider-Verse the 2-issue Spider-Verse miniseries that tied into everything. While some of the Spideys in there don't come back for Spider-Verse, it was still cool to just peek into these different worlds and see these various interpretations of Spider-Man just in different settings. I love that. I love seeing that, and it's one of the reasons why I freaking love Spider-Verse, because of the variety of different Spideys that we get to see, how they operate. For some, it's revisiting stories that we know. For some, it's brand new tales that are told for the story. But all of them, in my opinion, have all something unique and interesting. Taking what was Spider-Man and expanding on it, growing on it, putting it in a different direction, and not only that, but to see them all come together, compare and contrast, fighting the good fight together because that's just what they do because of Spider-Man. It's amazing, it kicks ass, and despite the flaws that Spider-Verse does have, I still love the story. I love seeing all the different Spider people working off of each other. I love seeing them kicking ass against the Inheritors. I love the character moments that result of having them in the same room. I love the drama of seeing these other versions of themselves. I love the joy when things go right for them. I love the awesomeness when they outsmart the bad guys. I love the action. I love the art. I love the varying artwork, most of it anyway. And overall, Spider-Verse is still just a fantastic story. It's not perfect, but it still kicks so much ass. And even if it's mostly just the inner nerd in me that loves the fan service, I still love Spider-Verse. And even after all this time, I still am happy to get more stories connected to it. Even if there's a part of me that goes, "Come on, let it end." But that's just my collector thinking, just kind of raging at having my collection never be complete. But so there you go. At the end of the day, the Spider-Man 2089 tie-ins kick ass, Spider-Verse as a whole kicks ass, and I still am very much looking forward to more. So, yeah, that's about it. We are finally done with all the comics in this book. It was a big-ass book, but we got through it in the end, and this also kind of marks the end of the official main Spider-Verse storyline. But we aren't done with the Spider-Verse era either. There are still more material to look at, specifically the follow-up material, as, after all, going back to the main Spider-Verse storyline, Billy did say that he was going to be trying to give the worlds that lost their Spideys a hero to fill in their shoes. And so, I think it's time we kind of check back in that and see how it goes. And on top of that, I think he might need a bit of help. He and Anya are only 2 Spider people. Imagine them going up against the whole multiverse. So, I hope you're able to tune in on Tuesday, as while the main Spider-Verse story is over, there's still plenty of follow-up to go. And I think it's time we see what happens to the Spider-Verse when the multiverse is destroyed. So, till then, hope you have a good day. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Take care.